the draft really started at pick number 2 last night. The Houston Texans held that card for pick number 2. What would they do? Well, they went out and with all the smoke and mirrors that we heard before was all flamed out as they went and drafted C.J. Stroud, the quarterback from Ohio State. They weren't done there. They went and traded back from where they were at pick 12. They get back up to number 3, and they get Will Anderson Jr., a guy who covered all of it. He saw it all happening. He's Brooks Kubena. He is the beat reporter from the Houston Chronicle who covers the Houston Texans. And Brooks, just kind of take me through that 2-3 pick of last night and how it all kind of went down for you.
Yeah, Kirk, what a crazy night for the Texans. It's easily the biggest trade on draft day for the franchise, and talking with other people around, just in its context in Houston, probably the biggest draft day trade since the Oilers traded up for Earl Campbell.
Wow.
It's just the one of the contexts around this scenario is the Texans the last couple of years have just been mired in just a couple of miserable 4-win seasons, and you're going into a process here with a general manager in Nick Caserio, who is on his 3rd head coach in 3 seasons with the Nico Ryans. And throughout the draft process, it had been clear that there seemed to be a tier between the 2 quarterbacks. A tier between the pool of quarterbacks,
correct,
I should say, with Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, and then the rest. And there was never any indication to me that the Texans didn't like Bryce Young, didn't like C.J. Stroud. It appeared to be just a matter of who was available. So going into the draft, it was really between me and my beat partner, Jonathan Alexander. There had been information we had gathered throughout the week prior that there was more information being gathered about C.J. Stroud leading up to the draft. Nick Caserio said last night that that's what they had done. They went all the way up to the all the way up until the draft day, making their decision about Stroud. And I think some of the silence kind of circulated about what exactly they were going to do. And of course, convention says at number 2, you're going to have to make your choice between one of the top quarterbacks available or the best non-quarterback available. And they decided, why not both? And it was a stunning move to all of Houston. They had a huge draft party at a place called the Miller Outdoor Theater downtown Houston, and the place just went bonkers. We had several reporters there, and there are videos there just showing Houstonians react to that. And there are analytics that I've seen that evaluate draft picks. There's also obviously the Jimmy Johnson chart that shows what the Texans gave up may not match the exact value of what there is, and that's certainly a debate to be had. But for the Texans to bring in one of the top quarterbacks, some might argue a 1A to 1B to Bryce Young out of this draft, and a defensive player that, in the defensive-minded D'Amico Ryans, who engineered the best defense in the NFL last year. This is a team that's plugged in 2 significant upgrades on a team that should be much better than it was last year. You've energized not only the team, but the fan base around it. I mean, this is an organization who has seen visiting fan bases outnumber their own at home far too many times in the past couple of years. And it's significant to think about Caserio in the context that he can't guarantee that he would be in position to draft whoever it would be next year. They've now, he's been defined by his trades. I mean, the Deshaun Watson trade was the biggest thing about his career,
right,
and it gave him 3 more first-round picks among the 6 that they returned from the Browns. And by expending pretty much all of them at this point, he's accelerated the expectation for the return on his investment. So this is a big move, and we'll see how this works out as in history, depending on how much it goes. But for now, I asked Nick Caserio why he was comfortable pulling the trigger on that trade in this context, using those picks. And so, well, you can acquire you can acquire draft picks all you want, and then you just have to decide how to use them. They're just as much trade assets as they are draft picks. So this is these are 2 players that they had conviction on, and of course, Will Anderson was the one they traded for. But that's how it all went down.
Brooks, the Houston Astros, they won the World Series. The Houston Rockets have been sort of in a rebuild. Now they're looking for a new head coach. And then the Houston Texans, you mentioned the last 4 seasons, they have, losing seasons. I felt like these picks, 2 and 3, I saw the headline, the 2-3 punch of now C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson Jr. These are 2 faces of the city now, not just of the football team, but 2 faces of the city where now it can be defined by its football team. This to me tells me that the rebuild is now over, that this is now about retooling and making this team compete in the AFC South.
Yeah, I would say that your assessment's correct there, Kirk. I mean, this is a team that finally got past its salary cap problems. They had the largest dead money hit in the NFL last year and was pretty high up the year before. So this was the first free agency cycle where they were able to add pieces that will fill their holes on the roster and the depth chart. So when you add that kind of talent, you are then looking for the key players that will elevate the team. And that's exactly what these 2 players can do. I mean, obviously, the Texans, like any team, know that no position is more integral to the success of a team than a quarterback. And C.J. Stroud is, that was kind of one of the things that I just from talking to people at the Combine, at the Pro Days, weeks leading up to this, the context around C.J. Stroud, it was surprising to me because we were talking about 2 quarterbacks in Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud who are from blue blood programs, who had about as good a numbers as anybody had in a draft. I mean, I think he had 87 touchdowns and 12 interceptions in 2 years, and he looked. I mean, just digging through his film and watching up and talking to other people, I mean, he called himself a ball placement specialist. I mean, his accuracy is completely on key. And, I mean, to put someone in that situation in an offense that has Dameon Pierce in the backfield, they had Devin Singletary in free agency. I mean, their wide receiver core is right now Robert Woods, John Metchie, and Nico Collins in the core of it. I mean, I think that needs some upgrades too in depth, but this is a team that's ready for its elite talent. So stepping in there, Will Anderson's going to do the same on the defensive edge, and we know what D'Amico Ryans can do in the defense. So, I mean, again, as I said previously, this is a team that's trying to become relevant again. And a lot of the Texans fans had kind of gone into protective dormancy, and they all came out last night. So there are a lot of things behind this. But these are 2 great players who are going to be at the front in the face of this franchise for sure.
Texans beat writer for the Houston Chronicle, Brooks Kubena, joining the Rich Eisen Show. Kirk Morrison filling in for Rich. You can also follow him on Twitter at @bkubena, Kubena on Twitter. And, Brooks, obviously, C.J. Stroud's pick number 2, and we're going to ask this question. I know you're going to ask D'Amico Ryans and Nick Caserio, but there is a quarterback right now still currently on the roster in Houston named Davis Mills, who started the last couple of seasons. What does this now mean for Davis Mills? Is he sort of the starter to start this thing off, or is it a true competition between C.J. Stroud and Davis Mills?
It would surprise me if C.J. Stroud is not the person taking the first snap in the first game. Davis Mills was a 3rd-round pick, the first selection ever by Nick Caserio out of Stanford, and he went into that season, and it was Tyrod Taylor in 2021. They wanted to see him develop over time. He had a pretty good ending through the last 5 games of the 21 season, and remember that was when David Culley was the head coach. Tim Kelly, former offensive coordinator, was there. Part of what they tried to do after the Texans fired Culley and elevated Pep Hamilton, was the quarterback coach at the time, was giving them the opportunity to see what they had in Davis Mills and giving him the best scenario with consistency with Hamilton, who was his quarterback coach and had Stanford ties, understood some of the offense and the skills that Davis Mills had, and to see if they could get the top value out of a 3rd-round quarterback who then subsequently wouldn't count so much to their cap space, and they could address other things with those 2 first-round picks later on. It didn't work out that way. Davis Mills in last season, it regressed heavily. We could get into the statistics, but, through both quarterbacks, they scored 6 touchdowns for the other team. Mills threw several pick sixes throughout the year. His accuracy was off. This was under a favorable situation with Pep Hamilton, who was let go and along with the rest of the Texans, most of the Texans coaching staff from last season, and they did less with more on the offense. And they averaged the fewest yards per drive in the NFL again. They had a lot of trouble getting the ball downfield, and it was clear to everyone by the end of the year that the Texans would be pursuing a quarterback and needed to do that. And that was really why it was pretty interesting to me that the past month or so there were a lot of conversations that the Texans might pass up on a quarterback because they definitely needed one. So this is a scenario where the Texans picked up Case Keenum, a veteran quarterback, journeyman from the NFL in free agency. I expect him to be kind of in this situation with Davis Mills to compete for a backup role. I mean, every coach is going to say publicly with a new rookie, they have to earn it. They have to come in and
right.
get the job. But this is a scenario where you drafted C.J. Stroud number 2 overall with the expectation for him to go into an offense. Bobby Slowick from the San Francisco 49ers, this is his first time as an offensive coordinator.
Correct.
He's building a system around the players that he has, and they went and got one here. So that's going to be part of this. They're building an offense around the talent they have, and C.J. Stroud is the biggest asset they have so far for that.
Just a couple more minutes here with Brooks Kubena, the Texans beat writer for the Houston Chronicle. And so they got the big 2-3 punch, C.J. Stroud, Will Anderson. The Texans still got 10 picks, right? They still got 10 picks left. They got 2 tonight in the third round. No second rounders. Obviously forfeited those picks in the trades, but 2 in the third round. They still got another 8 in rounds 4 through 7. If you had to gauge whether they kind of take their aim tonight in the third round, where could they bolster their roster in rounds 3 and then the rest of the weekend?
So they don't pick until pick 65 here, right. And the Texans are prone to trade under Nick Caserio. That's pretty much his identity. They pack up on picks. They use their late rounds. They package them together, and they move up for better draft positioning. I expect the Texans to do that today. The past couple of years, I think Caserio has now executed 8 draft day trades in 3 seasons with the Texans. They've addressed their major needs at quarterback and defensive end. They have no clear starter at center, and they could use depth at linebacker and wide receiver. Now, one of the scenarios that happened by trading their number 33 overall pick is that they missed out on an opportunity that I thought they might use if the wide receiver pool pushed back far enough, which it did. Jackson Smith-Njigba wasn't selected until pick number 20. If they hadn't traded up from 12 to 3, I'd have thought that maybe they might have tried to move up from 33 to get into that mix. What wide receivers are available for them to go up in positioning? They still need to get their center on the board. There's a couple that could go in that second, third round range. Perhaps if they like one well enough, that's the kind of player they might move up for because their offensive line is pretty dang solid the rest of the way other than that center. You got Laramie Thompson at left tackle, Titus Howard at right tackle, a first-round pick by them in 2019. They addressed their guard position in the draft last year with Kenyon Green and then traded for Shaq Mason in the offseason. So that would be a major thing for them. So I would expect them, again, not to just be dormant and sitting there and waiting to draft at 65. I think they package some of these picks to move up again, and that's the identity that we've come to know about Caserio and his personnel department in this era.
Hey, Brooks, last one before I let you go. Obviously, pictures were circulating around the internet this week, and to see the return of John Metchie, who's been cleared. He's practicing or doing team activities. What's the story with John, and what should we expect with Metchie this upcoming season?
It's one of the more remarkable stories with the Texans right now. Last year, I remember we were talking to him, and he said that because he was coming off an ACL tear, if you remember, and he was, I'm going to be back in July. He was so into being a part of the team and getting into football, and then in July was when the diagnosis came with his battle with leukemia went throughout the year, and we saw him often throughout the season in the locker room, at practices, and his presence was clear with the team. The teammates, the coaches, they always were just encouraged by where he was and how much energy he was showing to people and the positivity between that. So his return is so meaningful to both him and the team, just off the field for one, and on the field, his presence is going to be very important, of course, because now drafting C.J. Stroud and not addressing the wide receiver position in the first round, we'll see what they do with the rest of the draft. Like I said earlier, they signed Robert Woods after trading Brandon Cooks.
Right.
So now they have Nico Collins, who's battled injuries. John Metchie is in that mix to be part of the core. He was an inside-outside receiver at Alabama, a dynamic guy who could score frequently. They need a lot of weapons downfield to attract attention from the defenses to open up the rest of it. And Metchie's a guy that can do that. I'm excited to see him for myself in practice, to see where he's at with his speed, with his knee, with his health, all of that. But it's a major, major addition for the Texans to have him. And I've heard that our expectation should be that he's playing this year. So that's evident by him even practicing. So a lot of good news with his return there.
Brooks, I know I got to let you go. It's been an exciting time over the last couple of days in Houston, but still more work ahead for this Texans franchise. I know you're going to be covering it all. 10 picks over the next 2 days for the Houston Texans. We'll be following you at Kubena, Kubena on Twitter. He's Brooks Kubena, the Texans beat reporter for the Houston Chronicle. Appreciate the time, Brooks.
Yeah, never a dull moment around here. Thanks. Anytime, Kirk.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.